everyone, it's Rosanna. Today I have a make along that is it kind of piggybacks off of the one I just posted, which was for ducks and geese, kind of a vintage style cotton ornament. And I wanted to show you how to make the accessories, some little miniature items, and of course it needed to be in its own video for time. And I do want to mention that I find making small things something that's helpful when I'm having a lot of stress or anxiety. So this is one of those things where none of this is very complicated and it can all kind of be accomplished in a fairly short amount of time. So I find these good little projects to kind of busy my hands and quiet my mind when I'm really having a lot of anxiety or stress. So if you can, find a few minutes to create something, especially like to wrap a small package, I think that's a nice way to kind of diffuse a little bit of tension or anxiety or stress. So what we're going to make is two things that are primarily out of cotton and a little bit of foil, but I mean spun cotton for the finishing layers of it. So we'll make little Christmas puddings and little houses. You could make it like a gingerbread house, or you could make it more like a putz style house. And then we're also going to wrap packages. And if you're only interested in one of those, of course, the chapters are marked. The packages are, the simplest, but I also find that something that you can do when your mind is just like racing and you can't concentrate very much. That would be a good choice, is just wrapping a bunch of little packages. And these are all things that you could obviously use to make your little ornament more interesting, but also they would be perfect for doll houses. And if you're just a miniaturist and like to display miniatures or make or collect them, this would be a good way to start trying to make some of your own. So my intention is to keep this as short as I possibly can while still giving you a very good idea of how I made each little item. We'll focus, I think, the most on the steps for the Christmas pudding, and I'll do some little packages, show you some different options for how you can make those. And then the little house, depending on time, there is a short for it, like the 1-minute video that's in the long form. So you can see like very quickly how I made that. And I may just kind of speed up the video here for that portion so that you can get an idea, but I may not narrate the whole thing for the little houses. We'll just see where we get for time, because I definitely want to keep this under an hour, but if I could get it to like 45 minutes, that would be great. So that's kind of my goal, is just to give you some sweet little projects to work on for this kind of, it's a festive time of year when you might be wanting to do a few little handmade things, but it's also a stressful time of year. So I feel like these might be nice little things to pull out and work on a bit for various reasons. So let's get to the supplies. And so if you'd rather not hear me ramble, there will be a supply slide at the end of this chapter, and I'll mark it with its own little marker, so you should just be able to go to that and read the slide if you would rather be informed of them that way. So the first thing is cotton balls. That's for our pudding and our little houses, and then I'm going to put these off to the side because they always reflect a lot of light. But these are cotton balls, just like drugstore cotton balls. You can buy a whole bunch, like 100 for $1 or $2. And that's all you need. You can use something fancier if you have it, but that's fine. Foil, I save the wrappers from my chocolate bars. You can use other clean used foil if you have something that's dry and fairly clean. We'll be using some cardboard. So if you have corrugated cardboard, which is the packing box or shipping box type, or if you have more of the pressed fiber board, which is like what would be for a cereal box or something like that, we'll be using both types of that. Then if you have felt or quilt batting, that is going to be very handy for the kind of glaze or the sauce for the Christmas pudding. I did it with fabric too, so I'll show you how that works, and you could probably also make it work with paper. So I'm showing fabric, just any sort of fabric scraps that you have, preferably white would be great for the sauce, but we might have uses for other fabric scraps. I'll show you when we get to that portion. If you have like brown tissue paper or brown paper, that's an option for wrapping, especially an old, they didn't used to have printed wrapping paper. That wouldn't have been very common 100 years ago. They would have wrapped things in brown paper or newsprint. Of course, they might have printed their own designs, but they wouldn't have had the kind of wrapping paper we have now. And I do have this was a wallpaper for a mouse house that I have up as a digital download in my shop. It's $2 for that, but I think if I have time, I will put together these 4 designs as their own kind of digital download, and that obviously would be like a $2 download where you could have 4 different patterns of wrapping paper for small packages. So hopefully I'll get that done and in the shop, but if not, there is that one available, or you can get creative and find other little, like scrapbook papers or things that you have. I also like wrapping packages with old fabric scraps. So if you've saved some that are kind of small prints, this is a really good time to do something with just a very small bit of fabric that maybe you weren't sure how you could use. So I do like to use that. And if you have bits of lace, I'm sorry, I'm turning around from the camera to see if I can pull out a piece of lace for you. That can work for kind of a bow or a ribbon on the top. String, so you could use embroidery floss or any type of string or twine for wrapping the packages, and also for your hangers for your ornaments. If you have crepe paper, we might use that again. I'm not sure if we'll get to the flower. Then your options for paste for the spun cotton are this cornstarch paste that is a cooked cornstarch and water. Very simple. I just posted a video last week on how to make that, and I'm really, really enjoying it. So I really recommend making that up, and people use that for all kinds of things. People have commented they use it for scrapbooking, for making piñatas, kind of more like a paper mache paste. So that's very useful and very simple and very environmentally friendly. So I'm enjoying that. But you can also use school glue and water. So just the Elmer's school glue and water, and I do a 1:4 ratio, so 1 part of the PVA school glue and 4 parts water. So that's your other option for the spun cotton portion of this. And scissors, wire of any description, whatever wire you like to use that. A large-eyed needle or a darning needle is very handy when we're putting in hangers for ornaments. So this is always something that I like to have on hand. Mica flakes and gold mica dust. Those are kind of my special touches. They're linked if you want to invest in your own. They're available on Amazon, eBay, Etsy, different places. And then hot glue. I always love to have a little hot glue on hand. And you could use super glue, and you could also use craft glue. You don't have to have all of those. You could have just one of them, or you can use a combination of all of them like I usually end up doing. And then if you're making the little house, like the gingerbread house, you might want an acrylic white color craft paint. And I'm using a little metallic paint for part of the figgy pudding, where I'm painting the little platter with gold metallic craft paint, but you could go different directions with that too. And then I'll be using watercolors. I have these really lovely ones, which some of you have seen and realized how nice they were. I never had nice watercolors. These were sent to me as a surprise, a gift from the dearest friend. She was someone I grew up knowing, and then she had moved away in the last several years, and I hadn't really been in touch with her, and she sent me these because she had seen my videos somehow, or seen my art, and she sent me these handmade watercolors. So the maker is Jasper Stardust. I'll link it below. He sells on Etsy. These are the nicest watercolors I've ever had, and they are very lovely. But you don't have to have such nice ones. I've always just had like the tubes, and Winsor & Newton was probably the nicest brand I had. I've had Van Gogh. I have all of them still. I just mix them up, and you can see how this is what I've always used. Honestly, the only reason I was using these lately is because they fit so much nicer on my very crowded table up here. So you don't need the really fancy ones, but if someone wants to gift you some, enjoy them because they're amazing. So I'm going to stop and think for a second. I'll come back on, and if I've missed anything, I'll share that. Otherwise, there is the slide, which should hopefully be just more cohesive and more complete than what I usually do in this setting. So I save chocolate bar wrappers. A lot of you know that. And that's what I use for the base of many of my spun cotton sculptures. So all you do is you just make a little ball. You could get fancier with the shape and give it kind of some scallop, more like the fancier pans that have, I don't know, they give different kind of impressions into the cake. But what I see, I think it is the most kind of old-fashioned and traditional form, or maybe a more humble form of the Christmas pudding, because they would have made it, I think, in just one of their crockery bowls. So it would have been just kind of a smooth bomb shape, and nothing too fancy, and that way you don't really have to get caught up in trying to do all that. But you can, if you want to, you can take a toothpick or a darning needle, and don't press your foil quite so tight, and then you could work in some little indentations if you wanted to. But I'm not going to bother with that because I think they look fine, just smooth, and I don't really think that it adds enough for these little tiny ones that it's worth it. But if you're making a larger one, that might make it a little bit more interesting. So if you were making more like an ornament like that, maybe you want to get fancier. Okay, so I just put you don't need the tape except if your foil isn't hanging together, so that's why I added a bit of tape on the bottom. Then I'm just going to take a cotton ball and unwind it. Now I am kind of spoiled now, and this is my favorite fiber, and I will link that, and it's available in an ornament materials kit, but I will show with the cotton ball, and it works just fine. It's just not quite as nice of a finish, and it's not, I don't enjoy painting the cotton balls quite as much as the other cotton fiber. So then I'm using my cornstarch mix, and I'm just going to start covering my foil shape. And the cornstarch is I've always used a glue mix with the school glue, and I find the cornstarch just a lot more pleasant to work with because it's not nearly as sticky. So the cotton doesn't stick to your fingers. You can see there's no fibers there because the cornstarch just kind of provides this slippery surface. It binds the cotton to itself and to the form, and it doesn't make your fingers sticky the way the glue does. So I'm at this point pretty well converted to thinking that cornstarch or potato starch, and I believe tapioca starch would do the same thing, but I haven't tried that one yet. But I think those are really worth the, I don't know, it might take 10 minutes total if you're stretching it to cook your starch or prepare it or whatever you want to say, but more like 5, I think. And then you've got about a half a pint, a cup of starch mix, which I think would last most of you for quite a while. and you just keep it in the fridge when you're not using it. I haven't had it on hand that long, so I can't tell you like how long it would last. But my feeling is if it doesn't sit out a lot, it would probably last at least a month. It might last longer than that. And I do have comments from a few of you saying that you use starch mix. And so if you want to weigh in the comments and let people know what you do or what your experience or knowledge about starch is, because I don't have a lot yet, but I so far haven't found anything to complain about with it. It's cheap, it's easy, it's natural. I like it. So there is our little pudding, and then I will go ahead and paint it with, I guess I'm using these partly, that is, I always have to say, that is my grandmother's battery operated Audubon bird clock. So it does different bird calls at each hour. It's here in my studio because this is what I think of as my grandma room in the house, because we salvaged the floor and the floorboards, I should say, from her bedroom, and then the window casings from what was the piano room of her house, because it was going to be torn down. And so those, we had closed in an exterior porch to make me another little art space. And so this is my art room, grandma room now, and I figured the bird clock should go in here, but it does squawk at us when I'm filming make-alongs. Okay, so you can see this is quite dark, and some of you know that I dry things in my oven or the toaster oven, and the last two that I made, they really actually got baked like a pudding for like, I mean, a pudding actually doesn't get baked, it gets steamed, but they baked for at least 20 minutes and got very nice and blackish brown. But actually I make Christmas pudding and I use the blackstrap molasses in it. And so they are quite, or at least mine is quite dark. So I thought that was very authentic that they had been baked to a very, very dark toasty color. Not that a Christmas pudding should be toasty in texture. That's all that you do. Then I'm going to let it dry. Now you can definitely air dry, but it'll probably need to dry at least overnight, if not 24 hours, especially in these colder months. If you're in the northern hemisphere, it's going to take a while for that to set up and be dry enough to glue things to. Although the way I'm doing it with if you're attaching like with hot glue, you want it to be all the way dry. If we're going to attach with the cornstarch, we could do it while it's a tiny bit wet, but we don't want the brown paint to bleed into the white cotton batting. So let's let that dry and we'll come back. Okay, the pudding is just about dry, but while we're waiting, we're going to do the berries and leaves. There are probably other ways you can, I mean, they do serve the pudding sometimes without holly, the holly berries. I'm sure a lot of times probably, because, I mean, I think it's more common for that to grow in England or the UK. I know some people grow it in the south here in the US, but I don't come across it too often here, and I would not have holly berries to decorate mine. I see people sometimes using glacéd cherries, but the hollyberry is very festive and traditional looking. But you could just do little berries if you wanted, or just, I guess it would be a cherry. So I just take a tiny, tiny bit of cotton and I roll it while it's dry, and then I just add a little bit of acrylic paint, and then let's see if I can get my little piece of foil that I use. I just have a little piece of foil where I dry things. So take that one was bigger than some of I made the others very, very tiny. So roll it into a ball dry, and then you're basically just sticking it together with the acrylic paint. If you don't want to do that, you can use a tiny bit of whatever starch or glue you're using, and then you can use watercolor or whatever paint you have. Gouache would work fine. Not much to it. I find that if I get it wet to start, it doesn't roll together as smoothly. It kind of wants to have cracks in it, so the cotton kind of clings to itself better dry for these tiny little berries than it does when it's wet. It doesn't want to make a nice ball for me anyway. So far I've been making larger holly berries than my first ones were, so let's see if I can scale it down a tiny bit. I think it's because I'm using the cotton ball like I always like to do for you all, because I assume that's what most of you will be experimenting with. That one's a little smaller, but it doesn't separate out quite as fine as the other fiber that I use. That one's not good. If it doesn't go well right at the start, sometimes you're better off just starting again, because they just never get as smooth. That one's okay. Okay, so you will really only need 3 or 4 for the top of a pudding. I'm going to wash my fingers off and we'll do our little leaves. I painted crepe paper and then realized I have a lot of green crepe paper, but I'm going to paint it so that I'm assuming a lot of you won't have just green paper on hand, so we'll paint our leaves together. So I'm just going to cut out a holly leaf for you the way I did it. Obviously they're very, very spiny, and they would have all these little, you know, like they're wavy and spiny, and I can't at this size do nearly as many spines as a real leaf would have, so I basically do 6 sides if I can. Try to show you that. Okay, so 6 sides, that's what I go for, and it looks close enough. It looks like a holly leaf. So I will cut out several of those, and then I will paint them and just kind of speed through that if I can. So now we're going to take our flannel or our batting, which is what I have, or let me just cut this. So I just kind of eyeball a piece to make our glaze, and you just cut out, like, it depends on what you want the glaze to look like. It could be more, you know, well, I don't need to talk you through that. Glaze can look a lot of different ways. I wanted some really long, skinny drips coming over the side, so that's what I am demonstrating. It will look like a kooky starfish when I'm done, or an octopus or something. And I just cut out I mean, I could probably try a little bit thinner, but I was concerned that the batting would tear if I did a lot thinner little drips. So you just cut out like that. Now, I told you I would try with fabric, and I don't think it will look quite as nice, but I think it will work. And so I'm going to cut this out and show you what it would look like on the pudding. And then I'm going to try a fabric one to see if it looks halfway decent. Okay, so I just, if you are using glue mix and not the starch, don't just use your glue mix to attach this, because the water is going to bleed into your pudding, pull that pigment out into your what is supposed to be your white icing, and it will just, now mine is not perfectly white. There was a little bit of bleeding, but I don't mind a little bit. It's supposed to look antique and aged, but you won't want it to just turn like completely tan probably, because it's the contrast of this with the dark pudding, I think, that makes it recognizable as the Christmas pudding. So I would just use your straight school glue or craft glue to glue it down. Then to get the edges to stick down, just use some more of the straight glue to really kind of work those edges into the pudding. So let me cut out a fabric one and I'll be right back, and we'll see how that works. Here's my fabric one I cut, kind of a weird shape, but that is where it's nice to have the felt or batting, because you don't get the little threads coming off, which make it look a little bit less like an actual glaze. I don't know how to, I don't want to pull those even, because I know they'll just fray more. So I'm gonna see if I can just attach it and not have any more fraying. With the starch, and it might be a little bit more watery today because it's the second day, but I didn't have a lot of trouble with bleeding, and my plan is, if it does bleed out a little bit into the fabric because it's not as thick, and if my starch maybe is a little bit more watery, I will just try to add some acrylic craft paint on top. I was considering doing that anyway, because it will cover the weave of the fabric, which you can see, and you can't, of course, with the batting or with felt, because it's just a tighter. I don't think that looks bad though at this point. So I'm going to hope that it doesn't bleed anymore, and I'm trying to decide if I'm okay. I think I might use, oops, sorry, I'm jiggling the camera for you. I hope that wasn't too long that I was doing that. Let me just add a bit of the paint here, and then I'm going to sprinkle a bit of mica. I'm not sure it looks better with the paint, only because I like working with cotton and fabric and things that aren't colored with, like when I have to use the acrylic, I always feel like it takes away from the antique-y look somehow. I don't know if it's because the colors are not natural pigments, like when I use watercolor, especially the handmade ones that I'm using, they're more, I think, naturally sourced or occurring pigments, and so I don't know if that's why I get a different feel or look with those things. But anyway, okay, I added a bit of paint, and then I'm going to, but as you saw, I think it looked okay, and maybe it looked better without it. Now I'm just dabbing a little bit more starch, cornstarch on, and I'm going to sprinkle with my mica flakes. And then what I'm going to do is dry it again. We will punch a little hole for the hanger for this, because you want to do that before you glue on your little holly decoration on the top, and we'll make the platter for it here while it dries. The platter is so simple. I should have kept it here though. the pudding so that I could make it the right size. I think it's similar to this one, so I'll go off of that. If you want to, you could find like this probably bottle would be just about the right size, and you could trace a nice perfect circle for yourself, but I rarely do that. I just like to struggle and trim and then end up with something not quite so perfect. You can decide, do you want a lot of platter tucking out, or do you want it to be mostly hidden? I don't like a ton because I don't want to spend any time right now making the platter super fancy, but you could definitely, rather than just going that metallic, ooh, I just about snipped my goose's ribbon. That's what I get for having too many things on my table. What was I saying? The platter. Oh, if you don't want to use metallic paint, you could, paint it to look like some sort of a ceramic, just get festive and paint it like some sort of china pattern. But this is the simplest in my opinion, so that's the route I'm going today, because I'm demonstrating, I guess, a number of things, and if I was just doing the pudding in this video, I might spend more time showing you a decorative plate for it. But this is the simplest way I know of to kind of have a serving receptacle for your Christmas pudding. I'm going to stick that in with the berries and the pudding and everything, and we'll come back and assemble it, and then I will okay, hot out of the oven. It looks okay. I definitely don't think it looks as nice as the batting, but it's all right. It's acceptable, and it'll probably look a little cuter once we add the holly berries and leaves. Okay, I probably am just gonna turn off the stand so I can make this speedier, but I'm going to attach with I'm going to use my craft glue. I used super glue last time. I'm going to try just the Aleene's tacky, clear tacky. I'm going to poke in my hole. So this is important if you are making a hanging ornament out of this. You could go all the way through and all the way through your charger or your platter and put, twine or something up through here. I'm just going to put a bit of wire hooked over, and the reason I'm saying that's important to do now before you attach that is your holly is that you're going to want this to hang out of the center, but you're also going to want your holly to be basically in the center, so you need your wire placed there so that you don't have to try to punch through your beautiful holly that you've fussed with and labored over. So put your hanger in whatever it's going to be, whether it's twine or wire, put that in first and save yourself a headache. just going to, I had filmed this package part before, but I wanted to do it in a maybe quicker way to save us some time. So what I'm going to do is just talk you through this very beginning part and your options for what you could use for materials, and then I'll just probably speed up the video a little bit and let you listen to maybe some nice holiday piano music or something instead of me rambling, because you've had a lot of me lately. So the first thing is, if you don't have anything else, brown paper is great, and you could actually get really creative with that in a very easy way. Like you could cut out your little sheet of grocery sack or packing paper or whatever you have, and just do some red polka dots on that with, like, the end of your paintbrush. You could just do some tiny dots, or you could just paint on little hearts, or if you had a small stamp, you could do something. So you could even like carve a little potato stamp out, and make little tree designs. So you could even just make the wrapping paper itself kind of a crafty, artistic project. But if, like I said, these are available on my website. Boy, this goose doesn't like to stand up. He's too heavy in the back. And you could go that route, or you could find other pretty papers around your house, or you could find little fabric scraps. And so the way I do these packages is, I mentioned the cardboard, which we're going to use. This is corrugated cardboard, which you just want something that's fairly thick, so because that's what we're going to be making kind of a faux little box or package out of. But I also remembered when I grabbed this one to show you the brown paper package, that this one I just wrapped up an old scrap of fabric. It wasn't something that I really had any use for, and I didn't particularly like the fabric. But like, if you just have some scraps of felt or fabric or anything, you can, I have a bad fly in here, you can just wrap that up. So it doesn't have to be something hard, it could be something soft, but you just kind of fold it into a square or rectangle, and that will work. Otherwise, you can do the cardboard route, and I do use my hot glue, I know. So if some of you are avoiding plastics, you will probably want to cut your cardboard into, just about equal sizes, and glue the layers of that together with a friendlier glue, or you could use some sort of paste. I haven't tried it yet with the cornstarch paste to see if it would work. You would obviously just have to let it dry very thoroughly before you wrapped it, or it would kind of bleed into your paper or your fabric. So that's an option. There's probably other things you could do. You could actually, I'm just thinking what you could actually do is you could just tape the edges. So you could use any kind of, I understand that most tape also contains some plastic, but also that would work if you don't have access to a glue gun. You could just put a little tape around it, and that would work too. So those are the ways you can kind of make the interior of your package. And so I will just show you, like, I'm probably going to use this pretty little red scrap, but I might make a larger package so that I can show off more of that pattern that's on there. This one would look really cute with this little star fabric. And all I will mention is that if you like your packages to look very nice and crisp cornered, which I don't have any like that to show you because I don't wrap that well, but if you are wanting to be able to do that, then paper obviously is going to be a better choice for you than the fabric, because you can't, well, and maybe someone can, I can't get nice corners, but I didn't try that hard, honestly. So I'm just gonna do the rest of this, and there will not be me talking, and so it will go faster, and you can just get an idea of where I went, and then you can do some of that yourself. I do think this is so fun if you have a dollhouse or a display of miniature things. If you have a tiny tree, or some of the sisal trees, you could just do a big pile of little gifts around them with some little figurines or dolls or whatever you have. And I do think this is a nice little project to use up bits of things and have your hands busy. I just had a little idea to see if I could make a ribbon flower for the top of this package. So I'm just going to kind of gather it together a little bit. One of you mentioned I have a fabric flower video from a few years ago, and someone just commented on it and asked about this. Instead of hot glue, if you could use like a quick drying craft glue, and she mentioned it was like an actual brand and I hadn't heard of it. So I didn't even know there was such a thing out there as like an instant drying craft glue. But that would be probably handy in this. I thought about sewing the bottom ruche, you know, kind of a running stitch on the bottom of my ribbon and gathering it together that way, but I know some of you don't want to sew if you don't have to, and so I just thought I would see if I could do this. This is actually not ribbon, but it's rayon seam binding, like a vintage seam binding. It might be a little too big for this package, but I just wanted to see what happened because I mentioned that we could do flowers, and so you could do a little ribbon flower. And if you don't have the kind of stamens that you buy, where you can buy like 500 of them or something, you can just take a little piece of wire, paper covered wire, or just uncoated wire, and bend it over for the stamen. You can paint it yellow if you want to, or white, or whatever you want, or just leave it, and you can use that for the center. So it kind of works. I don't know if I'll actually put it on the top of my package, but it could definitely go on one of the little birds, which it won't look good with this one because it's the same color as her ribbon, but you could use a bit of ribbon or seam binding to make a flower to ornament one of your, well, to ornament your ornament. Okay, so for the little houses, I'm going to start with foil again. You might be able to think of a different base, but this just works for me. And kind of just decide how big you're going to want it. It will get, as I always say, a little bit larger than this once you're done. And you can do it two different ways. You can coat each, or cover each side, I should say, with a piece of cardboard of any sort. You could use corrugated or more like the pressed fiber board, or you can just do the roof. Now, you wouldn't even have to do the roof. You could shape that with your cotton, or if you had batting, you could just lay a piece of batting onto the roof and skip the cardboard altogether. But I kind of like the structure that the cardboard gives. It gives you a little bit harder edges to your house. Otherwise, it gets quite soft. And it can, I mean, that's kind of a cute, whimsical shape when it's very round. You know, all the corners are round. But like with the gingerbread house, which I actually made so I can just pull it off and on a piece of wire on that goose's back. I wanted it to look a little bit crisper, so that it looked like a gingerbread house, which does have kind of, you know, it's a more defined shape. And I'm looking for my little pink house. That one ended up a little softer looking. So I think that's kind of up to you. This one, and that is because with the gingerbread house, I did each wall and bottom, like I did each side of it with a piece of cardboard. And with this one, I just did cardboard on the roof and then covered the foil. So that is why it's a softer shape. Okay, so when you make your little shape, and you could make different shapes of houses. I do the very simple like gable end roof. So I make a little peak here with my foil, so that if you make just a rectangle and then you try to put on your roof, obviously you're going to have an empty spot here at the top that you'll have to try to stuff with cotton. So kind of think about making your gable end, which is the side of the house where, you know, this side you're going to see a lot of roof. And on this side, you're going to see kind of the top portion of the house that is kind of where you can have a window or something where the roof is not covering that. So this is what I have. And then I'm just going to take some, actually, you can use corrugated, but I'm going to use some pressed fiberboard, because with something this small, it can just get much larger quickly with the corrugated. And I'm not going to do each side. I'm not going to cut out pieces for anything except the top of it. So I'm just going to hot glue one piece on this side, and you can trim it a little bit if you need to once it's on still. You don't have to have it just perfect. This one needs cut down a tiny bit, and of course this is very possible without hot glue. This would work fine with a craft glue or school glue, and you can try it with your paste. It's going to stay mobile for longer, you know what I mean? Like, you'll be able to push it around. It'll slide around on you some, so you just want to keep that in mind. Okay, my sister had just come to visit for a second. And that's all you do. Then I'm just going to cover it with my cotton balls and my starch mix. You could use your glue mix. And I'll show it, but I won't talk through it. The other way you can save yourself a little bit of time is you can just cover the foil part with your cotton, and then if you have batting or felt, obviously if you're making kind of a putz style house, you can just glue one piece or two pieces, however you want to do, on the roof. Or you can, just coat in cotton if you want to, and then do some glitter or mica or whatever you want. But that is a way that you can kind of save yourself that little step if you just want the roof to look snow covered. Or like with the little gingerbread house, I thought, well, we'll just kind of skip that step of like, I could paint on little icing, but I would say it is difficult to paint on small details on cotton, and so I didn't really want to do little scallopy things, because it's a little rough and you just sometimes don't get the definition that you want. So I thought we'll just do like it's just fully iced up on the top. And so anyway, I'm just going to show you covering it, and then you can choose if you're doing a putz house. This one is not super defined. Some of the windows on the sides turned out a little better, but I just did little dots with watercolor and a line for some shutters, and that's all. The front is pretty smudgy, but I just went with it because that's what happened, and it just kind of looks, antique and folky, and it wasn't really about having a perfect little cottage. Is just kind of about the look of it, or the impression, I should say. So I'll cover this. I won't do any detail painting because I just don't want this video to get too long. Possibly in the future, if you guys really want to do another like tiny house video, we could spend a little bit more time and I could show you how I would paint details. just realized I was going to film the conclusion, kind of bring everything together and show you how it ended up. And I realized I forgot to show you how I made the little wreath out of my pipe cleaners. I feel like you should be able to probably look at this one and kind of just see what I've done there. But in case you don't feel confident, once you see what I have done, you will say, oh, you did not need to show me what you did, because I'm not going to do that. That is a rinky-dink way to do it. And I'm sure that most of you can figure out a much nicer way, because I literally just I did that without, oops, I'm knocking everything over. I was not thinking very hard. I was just quickly seeing what would happen if I if I did it. And that's what happened in my very imprecise way. But I'm doing this, and what I have done with these are new metallic pipe cleaners that I have set in vinegar for a couple hours, I think, and it turned the wire rusty and dark, which I liked the look of a little better than just the silver wire. But it's not a necessary step. It's kind of a subtle difference. Okay, that's all I did. Those kind of match up there. It's not perfect here. I'm probably gonna make that the top. It's sort of a star. Okay. that's all I did. Then I just added some wire for the hanger, and that was my wreath idea. So that's kind of, there you go. There's that. Here's our duck and our goose that fell over. Okay, I will now have my concluding thoughts now that we have everyone in the picture, and I hope I've remembered everything. Okay, just a few words. I forgot to mention this in the intro that we were going to do this little pipe cleaner wreath, so I slipped that in there if you saw it in the ornament video. So we did that. Here's how this little pudding turned out, and you can kind of see compared to this one that I did with the batting, you can just see there's a little bit less depth with the fabric, but I think it's still pretty and definitely festive and works just fine. And like I said, I think you could try paper for the sauce or drizzle, and that would look fine too. And then with the hangers, I mentioned very quickly at the end of that other video, you kind of want to wait until you have all the parts of your ornament done, and then you can decide where the hanger is going to need to be. So like with this goose, I had put a hanger into its back and then decided he would hold a package. Well, then I needed to cut that out and put a new one. And that's simple enough to do. If you have a large-eyed needle, you can poke a nice hole wherever you need it to. If you're just going straight into your bird, I just kind of guess where I think I might need it, and I test it out with the needle to see how it hangs. So you can see if I poke back here, you can see it's going to hang a little tipped forward. So you just kind of test a little bit, and that way you don't put it in at the wrong place. But if I was going to put this little house on her back, then I would actually want to put my hanger into the house itself, which is what I will probably be doing, is adding a little piece of wire, a loop of wire there. So I will just go in and make a hole, and then hot glue or super glue in a little piece of my favorite uncoated wire. So that's kind of where you want to think about things. And then like with this one, I had a hanger in there right here. For this one, it worked out fine because sometimes when you add weight to the ornaments, they will tip forward or backwards. This is a big enough goose that adding the gingerbread house didn't affect the weight of it very much. But I decided I would not glue it on. That's one option, is of course just to glue on with whatever glue you want. Another option is just to poke in a piece of wire at the center of where you want your object to be, and then poke a hole into your object. So I would poke a hole into the bottom of the house, and then that can go on and off as you want, or it could rotate. That will be harder to do, I think, with a package, not with a paper and cardboard package, but if you had one that was fabric inside and wrapped in fabric, you're probably going to have trouble poking a nice hole and sliding it onto wire. So that's kind of, I think that's all I needed to say about hangers, and we might do a tiny house video on its own at some point if there's interest in it, but I hope that some of these things will help you kind of jazz up your ornaments a little bit, or you could just do them as tiny standalone ornaments for a miniature tree, or of course accessories for a dollhouse. So I always love making tiny things, and I hope you enjoyed this too, and I hope it gave you lots of ideas, and you can just use some of these, you know, as inspiration and go in the directions that you want to. So thank you for being with me today. Thanks for your patience and your suggestions and your encouragement. I'm wishing you happy holidays and happy making. I'm adding this after all of the regular portions of the video and the sign off, just because I know a lot of you probably have had enough of me and are ready to switch off. But I wanted to share that these make-alongs, these past several make-alongs have been really inspired by older ladies and things they've taught me and kind of values they've instilled in me, and just wanting to celebrate them and remember them at this time of year, because I know most of us have lost grand ladies of different descriptions at this point in your life. You've most likely lost one or several or many grand ladies, and I of course talk a lot about my grandma and some other ladies. Some of you who follow me will know who I mention most, but one person I don't mention that often and that I'm thinking of a lot in particular as I made these little accessories and ornaments is my Aunt Lesa, who passed away before she really got to be what I would call a grand lady. She was just 60 when she passed away, and I typically reserve that term for a little bit older women. But the reason I'm reminded of her is this gold twine that I used brought back this very strong, and one of the last memories that I made with her. She was very near her passing. The last Christmas, she passed in January, so I was at her house during Christmas break because I was at college, and my mom was caring for her, and so I came to visit, and I happened to get snowed in when I did that. There was a great big snowstorm, and I ended up being at her house for several days. And so she had been working on, and even though it was after Christmas, she was still trying to get done. She made handmade kind of patchwork stockings always, and she made those for all of her kids, and then I think she made them for most of us cousins, and then for many of her children for their friends. And so that was just her thing. She loved to make stockings for people, and they were gorgeous. They were very big, like you could fit lots of good stuff in them, and then she would embroider the name at the top, and so she liked to do that with gold embroidery floss. And so she was working on that, on a name on a stocking, and I thought I would learn to embroider too. Now I could not sort out the gold embroidery floss. It just, if you've worked with it, it's difficult. It snarled and it was just a mess. So I gave up on that, and I just went to the regular satin floss. But she taught me to embroider. I learned to chain stitch and some other satin stitch and some basic things from her. And so I remember doing that with her, one of the last things that I was able to do with her. And we have kind of a photo of our hands together working over, an embroidery hoop, which is very, very precious to me. And so that was 15 years ago almost. So I'm thinking of her, and also because she was kind of the Christmas queen, and she would do all of the wonderful things. Anything that you could do special, she probably did, but she also would make very elaborate gingerbread houses, and that was something that I got to participate in several times. She would make, they weren't like little ones. She had her own template that she had worked out, and everyone would get their great big house. All the cousins would get a great big house to work on and decorate, and we would decorate them all day, one of the days of Christmas break. So she was just an amazing person, and thinking of her and hoping that this was a way to celebrate her in a small way. And that's what we can do at this time of year. We have our memories, and we can find little ways to honor some of the people who are gone, and also remember people in our lives now. So that's kind of always my intention with making, but especially at holidays. So that's just a little story I wanted to share, and just kind of have this video kind of dedicated to my Aunt Lesa. So thank you again for putting up with me. Sending you all love and wishing you happy making again.